What if the safest house in a blizzard had no roof at all? No shingles, no rafters, no proud front porch for neighbors to admire. Just a dark opening in a cliff wall, cut above a mining town that thought the earth was useless unless silver came out of it. In February of 1887, the town of Crown Creek, Idaho Territory, disappeared beneath snow. Not drifted, not slowed, disappeared. For 11 days, the storm hammered down through the canyon. Wind came off the high ridges and struck the valley so hard that windows burst inward. Snow climbed over fences, over wagons, over the first floors of timber houses. By the 9th morning, men could no longer tell where the street had been. By the 10th, only a few chimneys showed through the white. And by the 11th, even the chimneys were vanishing. Down in the valley, families were sealed inside their own homes. Their stoves were smoking. Their roofs were bending. Their firewood was running out by the hour. But 54 feet above Crown Creek, Caleb and Naomi Morrow were sitting beside a window cut straight into the mountain. Their house was not standing against the storm. It was inside the thing the storm could not move. The room was warm. Their mule, Tess, was dry in a side chamber carved from the same rock. A spring ran through a stone trough near the back wall. Sacks of flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, and dried apples sat stacked in shelves Caleb had chiseled by hand. Naomi watched the valley through a pale square of glass. For most of the winter, the people below had laughed at that window. They called the place the Badger Hole. They said no decent woman should have to live in a burrow. They said Caleb Morrow had spent too many years breaking stone and had finally begun thinking like one. Now the roofs below were gone, and the Badger Hole was the only house still breathing. Caleb did not look proud. He only looked down at the buried town, then at the rope coils hanging by the door. Naomi saw where his eyes had gone. "How many do you think are alive?" she asked. Caleb rubbed one hand over the rough stone sill. "Enough," he said quietly. "If we start before the snow hardens." 2 years earlier, nobody in Crown Creek had understood why a man would buy a cliff. The town had been young then, and loud with money. Silver wagons rolled down from the upper claims. Saloons stayed awake until sunrise. Every week brought new carpenters, new speculators, new men with maps rolled under their arms and greed riding high in their voices. Crown Creek sat in a steep canyon where the sun reached the valley floor late and left it early. Pines crowded the slopes. Sheer pale stone rose on the eastern wall, streaked with rust and black mineral stains. To most men, that stone meant only one thing: obstacle. It could not be plowed. It could not be fenced. It could not hold a storefront or a boarding house. The valley lots were the prize. The cliff was the leftover. Caleb Morrow saw it differently. He was 46, broad-shouldered, deliberate, with hands ruined by 25 years in quarries and lime kilns. He had cut church steps in Ohio, bridge piers in Missouri, and foundation stones for men rich enough to forget the hands that built under them. He did not love stone because it was pretty. He loved it because it told the truth. Hit it wrong, and it punished you. Read it right, and it carried weight for 100 years. Naomi was 42, a former schoolteacher from Indiana, who kept notebooks with pressed leaves, weather marks, Bible verses, and measurements of anything her husband thought too ordinary to write down. She had a quiet face, a sharper mind than people noticed at first, and the patience of someone who had already lost what gossip could not hurt. They had buried 3 infants before any of them were old enough to call them by name. After the third, Naomi stopped answering the women who said God would fill the house in his time. She and Caleb came west with no children, one mule, two tool chests, and a dream so plain that other people mistook it for madness. They wanted a house that would outlast them. Not a bigger house, not a finer house, a house that understood the mountain. The claim office stood behind the assay shed, where the clerk wore sleeve garters and a permanent expression of boredom. Caleb asked about the eastern cliff, the ledge with the deep overhang a half-mile above the mill road. The clerk laughed. "You mean the wall? I mean the ledge. Can't build a town on a wall." Caleb laid $6 on the desk. "No," he said, "but a wall can hold a house better than mud can." By supper, everyone in Crown Creek knew the quarryman had bought a cliff, not a mine, not a meadow, a cliff. Lucian Vale enjoyed the news most of all. Vale owned the sawmill, half the valley lots, 2 freight wagons, and more confidence than caution. He was building a 3-story timber house near the creek bend with a steep roof, a double parlor, a copper bathtub shipped from Portland, and glass windows that had cost more than Caleb's entire claim. He liked to call it the first proper home in Crown Creek. When he heard about the Morrow's cliff claim, he stood outside the assay office and announced, "Some men rise in the world. Morrow has decided to dig downward into it." The men laughed. "So, what shall we call it?" someone asked. Vale smiled. "The Badger Hole." That name stuck before sunset. Children shouted it from the road. Men repeated it in saloons. Women lowered their voices when Naomi entered the store, then raised them just enough for her to hear the pity. Poor Mrs. Morrow. Imagine leaving Indiana to live in a cave. Some husbands call that economy. I call it cruelty. Naomi bought lamp, oil, needles, and 2 pounds of coffee. She said nothing until she and Caleb were back on the ledge. Then she set the parcel down, looked over the valley, and smiled. "They think we are moving beneath them," she said. Caleb glanced at the cliff above their heads. "We are moving under something stronger." Construction began in May. Caleb did not blast. Blasting would fracture the face and wake every weakness in the rock. He worked with hand tools, slowly, reading the cliff by sound. A clean ring meant strength. A dull thud meant seam. A powdery scrape meant water had softened the stone. The ledge already had a roof, if a man was humble enough to call an overhang a roof. It reached 13 feet out from the wall, enough to throw rain and falling snow beyond the doorway. The opening faced south by southeast, not perfectly, but close enough to catch winter sun when the valley floor still lay in shade. Naomi measured the light every clear morning. By June, she knew the sun touched the ledge 4 hours longer than it touched Vale's Creek Bend lot in midwinter. By August, Caleb had cut the main room 19 feet wide and 14 feet deep. He left the ceiling arched, not flat, because stone carries best when it is allowed to be stone. He carved a sleeping alcove to the right, a cold pantry at the back, and a side chamber wide enough for Tess and the stores. He carved shelves instead of building cupboards. He shaped a smoke flue through an old crack, then lined it with fired clay. He sloped the stone floor so meltwater would run to a shallow channel and out through a notch under the threshold. Every decision looked strange from below. Every decision had a reason. Naomi mixed mortar, hauled chips, fit willow mats across the doorway at night, and kept a notebook of costs. Timber for frames, iron hinges, 3 panes of wavy glass, clay pipe, cast iron stove small enough to fit the room and heavy enough to matter. Total cost by the day they moved in, $286. Vale's copper bathtub had cost almost that. When the badger hole was finished, it did not look grand. It looked as if the mountain had opened one eye. A narrow door under the overhang, 3 windows glowing amber at dusk, a small rail of split cedar posts along the drop, a stone bench outside where Naomi liked to sit with her sewing when the light was good. The town continued laughing. Then winter came. The first winter was not severe, but it was instructive. Crown Creek burned wood like a starving furnace. Smoke lay in the valley every morning. Men rose before dawn to split more logs. Women stuffed rags into wall cracks and still woke to frost on their quilts. Vale's big house looked handsome under snow, but handsome did not keep heat. The tall rooms pulled warmth upward. The expensive glass sweated and froze along the edges. The steep roof shed snow onto the porch in hard piles that had to be chopped away. The badger hole, Caleb and Naomi burned half the fuel they expected. The sun warmed the stone floor. The back wall held the day's heat after dark. The overhang kept the entrance clear. The cliff behind them never took on the killing cold that settled over plank walls in the valley. Naomi wrote one line in her notebook that January. The mountain does not warm quickly, but it does not surrender warmth quickly either. Caleb read it twice. That line is better than the house, he said. No, she answered. The house taught it to me. Through the summer of 1886, Caleb improved the place as if winter were a person he expected to visit. He widened the pantry. He cut 2 more air vents, one high and one low. He set iron rings into the outer wall under the overhang, disguised enough that no one below noticed, strong enough to hold a loaded rope. He stacked dry wood under a shelf of stone where weather could not reach it. Naomi bought provisions in quantities that made the storekeeper raise his eyebrows. 6 barrels of flour, 90 pounds of beans, 40 pounds of salt pork, dried apples, onions, coffee, lamp oil, candles, vinegar, and liniment. You expecting a siege? The storekeeper asked. Naomi tied the last parcel. In the mountains, she said. Winter is a siege that does not announce itself. Old-timers had been muttering since September. The deer came down early. Birds vanished from the upper timber. The creek froze hard before Thanksgiving. Men who had trapped for 20 years said the beavers were packing lodges thick enough for a season out of Scripture. Crown Creek listened, then returned to the sound of saws and hammers. Money was still moving. Silver made men believe the future could be negotiated. Snow did not negotiate. It began on February 7th. At first, it was ordinary, heavy flakes, a hard wind, the kind of storm that filled the street and made men slap each other on the back for living through mountain country. By the 3rd day, nobody was laughing. Snow came sideways, then straight down, then sideways again from the other direction. The canyon became a churn of white. The creek vanished under wind-packed ice. Horses had to be cut loose from drifts that formed, while men were still holding the lead ropes. By the 5th day, the lower windows in town were covered. By the 7th, roofs began to complain. You could hear them at night. Not cracking yet. Just warning. Long wooden groans under weight no carpenter had calculated. Vale ordered men to shovel his roof, but the wind erased their work in an hour. He cursed the storm, the hired men, the roof pitch, the carpenter, the nails, and finally the valley itself. At the Badger Hole, the storm struck the cliff and split around it. Snow swept past the overhang and fell into the open air below. Some collected on the ledge, but never against the door. The vents breathed. The stove drew clean. The windows dimmed under blowing powder, then cleared when the gusts shifted. Naomi kept watch. She had stopped writing weather notes by the 8th day. There was nothing left to measure except danger. On the 9th morning, the church steeple disappeared. That was when Caleb took the ropes down from the wall. He uncoiled them on the stone floor, checked every braid, and set his gloved hand on the iron rings. Naomi looked at him. "You knew." Caleb did not answer right away. "I knew the valley was of bole," he said. "I knew boles fill. And the rings? I hoped I would never need them. The storm trapped them one more day. Then another. By the 11th night, the world below had become smooth white silence, except for 3 thin stains of smoke pushing through snow like dying breaths. Inside the buried homes, people had begun making terrible choices. If they fed the stove, smoke backed down the block chimney. If they let the fire die, the cold entered slowly, politely, and without mercy. The Pruitt family broke furniture for fuel. Mrs. Hanley held wet cloth over her children's mouths, while her husband tried to dig upward through the kitchen ceiling with a stove poker. At the Vale house, the north wall bowed inward until the wallpaper split. Lucian Vale, who had paid $9,000 to impress a town that could no longer see him, stood in his dining room with a lantern and watched a crack travel down the plaster like a black vein. Just after midnight, the wall failed. Snow came through the house with the force of water. It buried the piano first, then the parlor table, then the staircase. Vale's wife screamed from above. His 2 sons were trapped in a bedroom whose door would not open. Vale dug with bleeding hands while the house he had called proper folded around him. At dawn on the 12th day, the wind stopped. The silence was worse. No wagon wheels, no creek, no sawmill, no church bell, only the small settling sounds of a town buried alive. Caleb tied the first rope around his waist. Naomi pulled on her gloves. "You are not coming down," he said. She picked up the second rope. "I am not asking you." He stared at her, and for one foolish second, husband and wife stood on the edge of disaster, arguing like ordinary people in an ordinary house. Then Caleb nodded. They stepped under the overhang. The snowfield below was almost level with the lower branches of the pines. It had packed so hard in places that Caleb could walk on it, and so soft in others that one wrong step could swallow a man to the chest. He moved first, testing with a pole. Naomi followed with blankets tied to her back. They headed for the nearest smokestain. It took them 40 minutes to reach what had once been the Pruitt roof. There was no roof to see. Only a slight warmth under the snow, a faint gray breath, and the sound that made Naomi drop to her knees. A child coughing below the white. They dug with spades, then boards, then their hands. Caleb opened a shaft beside the chimney and shouted down. A voice answered so weakly it sounded like memory. "Here." The Pruitts came out one at a time after 6 hours underground. Father, mother, 2 boys, a grandmother who could not feefle her feet, a baby wrapped in a quilt blackened by smoke. Naomi gave the mother water before she gave her words. Then they moved to the next chimney, and the next. By sunset, they had pulled 16 people into the open air. None could stay there. The valley had become a grave with a sky over it. Houses were crushed, stoves buried, walls split, food trapped under snow and broken timber. The only dry shelter left was the one everyone had mocked. So Caleb led them up, one person at a time, rope around the waist, hands on the cliff path, eyes on the door under the stone overhang. The badger hole, built for 2 people and 1 mule, received them like an ark made of rock. Naomi did not waste tenderness on disorder. She put children in the sleeping alcove, frost-bitten feet, near the stove, but not too near, smoke-sick men by the lower vent, and the strongest survivors to melting snow, cutting ration portions, and carrying messages down the line. By the second night, 31 people lay shoulder to shoulder on the stone floor. The room smelled of wet wool, smoke, fear, and beans. Nobody called it a hole anymore. On the 3rd day after the storm, Caleb found the Vale house. He almost missed it. The grandest roof in Crown Creek was now a hump, with one broken gable jutting through the snow like a snapped rib. He dug near the gable and heard nothing. Then he moved toward the kitchen chimney and struck a pocket of warm air. Lucian Vale was alive, barely. His wife and sons were trapped in a space no wider than a pantry, boxed in by fallen beams and snow. The youngest boy had stopped speaking the day before. Vale's hands were torn to the flesh. His face was gray, his lips split, his eyes emptied of every public thing he had ever used to fill them. When Caleb broke through, Vale looked up without recognizing him. "Please," Vale whispered. "My boys." Caleb pulled the boys out first, then Mrs. Vale, then the man who had named his house a burrow for animals. At the base of the cliff path, Vale stopped. Above him, the badger hole glowed under the stone lip, smoke lifting clean from its flue, windows bright against the canyon wall. For 2 years, he had looked at that light and seen failure. Now it was the only light left. Vale tried to speak, but the cold had taken his pride before it took his voice. Caleb offered him the rope. "Climb," he said. Vale stared at the rope. "I called you a fool." Caleb's face did not change. "Then let a fool pull you up." And he did. 43 people survived the first week after the blizzard inside the Morrow's cliff house. Another 22 were rescued from buried rooms and dugout pockets with ropes, shafts, and teams organized from that ledge. 13 died before help reached them. 2 more died later from fever and frostbite. Crown Creek had been wounded past pretending. When the thaw came in April, it did not reveal a town. It revealed wreckage. The sawmill roof had collapsed. The church leaned at a dangerous angle. The boarding house had split through the middle. Vale's mansion, the one men had once walked past, slowly just to admire, was a broken pile of imported glass and pine beams spread across the snowmelt mud. The badger hole stood untouched. Not lucky, not charmed. Designed. The people gathered beneath the cliff because there was nowhere else large enough, dry enough, or honest to hold the meeting. Lucian Vale came with bandaged hands and one side of his face dark from frostbite. He did not stand on a crate. He did not speak like an owner. He stood in the mud with everyone else. "I built where men could see me," he said. His voice scraped badly. "I chose height only when it made me look taller. I chose glass because it looked rich. I chose timber because it went up fast. And I laughed at a man who chose stone because stone did not flatter him." He turned toward Caleb and Naomi. "I was wrong before the storm ever came." The crowd was silent. Vale looked up at the cliff house. That place did not survive because it was hidden. It survived because it belonged to the mountain. And when everything I built to be admired fell down, the thing I mocked had room for my children. Naomi stepped forward. She had not slept more than 3 hours at a time in nearly 2 weeks. Her skirt was stained with soot. Her hands were cracked from snow water and lye. "Mr. Vale," she said, "apology is not shelter." A small wind moved through the crowd. Naomi looked from face to face. "We can spend the summer rebuilding what failed and call it courage. Or we can admit the valley taught us something at a terrible price." She pointed to the eastern wall. "The cliff does not care who is rich. The storm does not care who is respected. The mountain does not ask us to be impressive. It asks us to pay attention." Caleb said less. He always did. "I will teach anyone who wants to cut stone," he said. "But I cannot teach anyone to be humble. That part has to happen first." Crown Creek rebuilt slowly. Not every house went into the cliff. Some families still needed shops along the road, barns near the creek, sheds close to the mill. But no one built the same way again. Cellars were dug deeper, roofs were braced lower. Chimneys were widened and shielded. Food stores moved above flood and snow lines. Winter rooms were cut into the hillside behind houses, and along the eastern wall, one ledge after another became a doorway. By 1892, 26 cliff rooms had been cut into Crown Creek's canyon walls. Some were homes, some were storerooms. One was a schoolroom that stayed warm on days when ink froze in the valley. Lucian Vale paid for a public refuge carved 30 feet into the stone, with benches, vents, a spring cistern, and hooks for lanterns. He also learned to swing a hammer, badly at first, then better. Naomi kept the winter notebook until the pages fell loose from the binding. In it, she recorded not only the storm, but the changes after it. 5 hard winters followed. No family in Crown Creek suffocated behind a blocked chimney again. No child froze because the only warm room had collapsed. No roof was trusted simply because it looked fine from the road. The town still mined silver. Men still chased money. Pride did not vanish from the canyon any more than snow vanished from the peaks. But after the blizzard, there was one sentence every builder heard before he laid his first sill. "What does the mountain know that you do not?" Caleb and Naomi never became important people in the way towns usually measure importance. They did not own the mill. They did not name the street. They did not leave children to carry the Morrow name. But for 31 more winters, their window burned in the cliff wall above Crown Creek. Travelers saw it from the road and asked why anyone would live there. The old residents had a different answer by then. They no longer said Badger Hole with a smirk. They said it the way a hungry person says bread. When Caleb died, Naomi had his tools hung above the stone bench outside the door. When Naomi died the following spring, the town carved one line into the lintel over the entrance. Not because she asked, because everyone knew the words were hers. "The mountain does not kneel to us." So the wise learn where to stand.